A few years back, I was sifting through a massive pile of CVs for a pre-sales engineering role, and this one file just stopped me dead in my tracks. Fresh graduate, and right there on page 1, a cascading wall of certifications. Not 5, not 10, exactly 27. Vendor badges, neutral foundations, little boot camps, you name it. The number 27 was staring right at me. But then we actually sat down for the technical interview, and man, reality hit hard. Despite this literal mountain of paper credentials, they had absolutely zero ability to execute. Throw a real-world scenario at them, total freeze. They couldn't perform a single practical task.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am your host, and today we're diving into Episode 3 of the Diabolikks pre-sales series. We are calling this one The Certification Path and Its Traps. We are really going to dissect that massive gap between just collecting certifications and actually building real competence in the IT industry. We'll look at the true weight of paper authority and, more importantly, how you can build a certification strategy that actually reflects your real-world field experience.
So here is our systematic curriculum for today. We'll kick things off with the 3 planes of certification. Then, we'll weigh vendor versus vendor-neutral paths. After that, we are going to diagnose what I call the certification collection disease. We'll pit experience directly against paper authority, and finally, we'll map out a solid 3-year certification plan. I promise you a total deconstruction of the certification ecosystem step by step with zero sales pressure. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1. The 3 planes of certification.
You see, the certification ecosystem isn't just some vanity tool to decorate your CV. It actually operates on 3 completely distinct functional planes. First up, employer evaluation. Look, when a hiring manager sees a cert, it basically proves a baseline level of competence. It simply shows the difference between someone who didn't study at all and someone who actually put in the hours to pass an exam. Then we have the vendor partnership plane. Vendor ecosystems rely heavily on corporate certification targets. If a systems integrator wants to become, say, an IBM Gold partner, they need a specific number of corporate points, and those points, they come directly from employees holding specific certifications. And finally, the third plane, learning discipline. For you, the individual, a certification should provide a structured roadmap to acquire new skills. The focus here has to be on the actual learning process itself, not just cramming to pass the test.
Moving on to Section 2, vendor versus vendor neutral, finding the balance.
When you are building your skill set, there are 2 main categories you really have to balance. On the right, we've got vendor-neutral certifications. We're talking CompTIA, ITIL, TOGAF. These give you broad, foundational concepts. The real superpower here is portability. If you grab a CompTIA Network Plus or an ITIL badge, those service management and networking principles, they are valid in absolutely any environment. Now, over on the left, we have vendor-specific certifications. VMware, IBM, Cisco, Veeam. These give you deep, actionable knowledge. Look, when you prep for a VMware VCP, you aren't just learning concepts. You are diving into the deep inner workings of vSphere HA logic. Studying for a VMCE, you are learning exactly how to design an immutable backup repository. The sweet spot is using the neutral side to build your foundation and the vendor-specific side to drive your depth.
But listen, vendor certifications come with some very specific risks. You absolutely need to watch out for these 3 traps. Number 1 is overdependence on a single vendor. If your entire identity is wrapped up in one vendor's badges, your career is essentially tethered to their market position. Just think about the massive market pivot and license price hikes after Broadcom acquired VMware. A lot of engineers who only invested in VMware had to seriously scramble. Trap number 2 is the exhausting renewal burden. Things like CCNA or VCP demand renewals every 2 or 3 years. Juggling multiple renewal cycles is completely exhausting. It literally steals your time from learning new tech. And trap 3, exam-focused study. Because these tests are usually multiple choice, people just learn how to spot the right answer on a screen instead of developing actual problem-solving discipline for the field.
Which brings us to Section 3, the certification collection disease and the overloaded CV.
Remember that CV we talked about earlier? An overloaded CV just looks like a massive, tangled pile of cheap copper badges. The symptoms of this disease are pretty glaring. You see a candidate with 20 or more totally unrelated credentials. Half of them are probably expired. And if you ask them, they'll admit they forgot the material a week after the test. The result? Zero field execution capability. When badges pile up in sheer volume like that, they lose absolutely all of their value. Honestly, as a technical director, when a resume like that lands on my desk, my internal alarm bells go off. I immediately become highly suspicious of what they actually know versus what they just crammed into their short-term memory.
And this usually turns into a highly toxic cycle. The root cause? It almost always boils down to misaligned incentives. We see this all the time where employers actually offer cash bonuses for every exam passed. So naturally, this drives superficial, surface-level studying just to line some pockets. Now take those misaligned corporate incentives and mix them with a candidate's own personal insecurity about their technical skills, and boom, you've created a really damaging feedback loop. The engineer chases that quick psychological hit, that short-term satisfaction of earning a new badge, without actually gaining a single ounce of real field capability. The cycle spins, the CV gets longer, and their true expertise just stagnates.
Let's move to Section 4, Experience versus Paper Authority.
Now, if we look at many regional public sectors, there is a very real administrative hurdle we have to acknowledge. You are constantly going to run into tender clauses that basically dictate the bidder must have a certain number of personnel with specific vendor certifications just to participate. Local public sector realities, like ECAP tender clauses, force systems integrators to maintain a specific pool of certified staff. It becomes an operational requirement just to get your foot in the door for public projects. On one hand, sure, it's an advantage because it's literally your ticket to play, but it's also a massive trap. It pushes integrators into this mindset where they think they just need a certified body for every single vendor, which completely destroys any chance of a focused, deep learning strategy.
I want to share a quick story from a meeting room that highlights this dynamic perfectly. So, I was in this really tough technical meeting alongside a highly certified external consultant. I spent a good 10 minutes thoroughly answering a really complex architecture question, laying out all the deep context. As we were wrapping up and walking out, the IT director stopped me. He pointed over to the consultant and asked me a very direct, very revealing question. He said, this guy has way more certifications than you do, but you clearly know what he doesn't know. Why is that?
My answer was simple. I looked right at him and said, it's because I've actually been working hands-on with these storage systems for 10 solid years. He got certified, but I actually lived through it. And that right there is the crucial punchline. Certifications absolutely give you authority. There is no denying that. But that authority does not magically cover real experience. Having a decade of actual in-the-trenches field experience with complex systems will always expose someone who just memorized concepts to pass a multiple-choice exam.
All right, Section 5, a 3-year plan for strategic certification. So, how do we fix this? Earning certifications should never be a random scattergun approach. You need a roadmap. In year 1, this is your deepening start. You pick one core area, go get one vendor-neutral and one vendor-specific certification. For example, a storage specialist might kick things off with a SNIA SCSE and an IBM Storage Sales V2. In year 2, you shift to deepening plus adjacent expansion. You start adding complementary tech. So our storage expert might tag on a VMware VCP and a Veeam VMCE. Why? Because storage fundamentally lives inside that backup window and virtualization environment. Finally, year 3 is all about strategic expansion. This is where you broaden your horizon, add an AWS cloud practitioner, or maybe dive into automation fundamentals with something like Ansible. And keep in mind, this strategy has to evolve as you gain seniority. If you are a junior engineer, avoid that collection trap like the plague. Aim for a maximum of 3 certs and demand at least 6 months of real field work for every single one. For mid-level engineers, your job is to build thematic bridges between different technologies. Don't just scatter your focus everywhere. Now, if you are a senior engineer, honestly, your personal exams matter a lot less. Your primary job is to manage the team's strategic certification pool. You need to carefully align your team's credentials with those critical vendor partnership requirements we broke down earlier. Well, that brings us to the end of today's analysis. But before we wrap, I want to leave you with one provocative thought. Certifications are tools. They are not your identity. When the purpose of a tool changes, or when the entire market shifts, you have to be willing to just put the tool down and let those expired credentials go. So take a hard look at your own CV today. Are you just a collector of copper badges, or are you actually building a strategic foundation for real field execution? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. In our next episode, we are going to unpack the art of discovery. You won't want to miss it. See you then.